Welcome, witches, wizards, and muggles alike, to another enchanting episode of Magical Tales from the Slytherin Common Room, bringing your favorite Harry Potter fanfiction to audio format. So sit back, relax, and Accio headphones, and let the magic begin.
Apostasy by Deydralinne, Chapter 53, The Vote. It had been a grueling 4 hours so far. The hearing room was so large that the warming charms kept shorting out every 20 minutes or so, and given that it was in a large castle that was made of stone, it made for a tedious task of continuously restoring them. The United Kingdom votes in favor of the petition. Tom spoke loudly and clearly, the signatures required for the petition floating into the pile of 4. Siberia does not support this notion, an elderly old man snapped, sending his papers unsigned toward the against pile. Monaco does not support. Another page drifted over to join the rest. One witch on the hearing committee looked smug about that fact. They had not been very impressed with the petition being brought forward, and Prudence Grimwood had made it clear that she, least of all, supported this motion. Bulgaria agrees to the abolishment, a gruff-looking wizard voted. Hermione's heart was pounding in her chest. The majority of the hearing so far had been arguing the case on why this was a necessary course of action for their world to take. She had been grilled on her stance on Muggle rights and how she could possibly be opposed to the obliviation of Muggles when she had obliviated her own parents. Cyprus are against. Each no vote had a sinking feeling of dread growing in her stomach. It was going to be so close, and she was losing confidence in her ability to pull this off. The last few weeks had been a nightmare of meetings after meetings, answering questions that nearly every country had about their proposal. While she hated every minute of it, she knew it had to be done. They needed to get across the finish line because she couldn't wait another 5 years to do this again. Germany is for. Draco slid his hand over to her and gripped her thigh. She knew it was an attempt at reassurance, but she was too wound up right now for it to have too much impact. Hermione did a quick count in her head, her heart dropped, and she sunk in defeat. The deciding decision would come down to one vote, a vote that she already knew the answer for. Because of those who remained, she knew whose vote she could count on. They had already pledged their support, but it would mean that the deciding vote would come down to Italy. Alicia, despite her own impending vote of no confidence, was still the elected official, and she had never looked so sour as she did now, sitting there in the stands. She had not stopped glaring daggers at Hermione since she had walked into the hearing room that morning. Alicia couldn't prove Hermione had caused the damage to her career, but she was fairly certain. She wasn't wrong. Hermione had no regrets about what she had done. She tried to remain optimistic in the sense that if the vote came back as no today, she would have the opportunity to plant the necessary changes within certain governments to guarantee the passing vote when she came back in 5 years' time. It would just be exhausting trying to maintain the control they had already gained over the last few months over that length of time. America, New Zealand, Portugal, Spain, and Colombia all voted in favor of removing the Statue of Secrecy. Hermione sighed. "We've lost," she whispered under her breath. Draco's hand squeezed her thigh sympathetically, slipping into her mind in an attempt to offer her reassurance. "It will be okay. We will have more time to prepare next time." Draco sighed. Hermione didn't know what to say. She knew he was trying to help, but right now she felt an overwhelming feeling of defeat. It just all felt never-ending. While the war and this petition were not connected, she had formed a correlation to them in her head. As such, without both victories, it felt as though she had neither, and the thought of remaining so heavily in politics for the next 5 years was exhausting. Italy, Alicia's eyes locked with hers across the room, supports the decision, she snarled reluctantly. Hermione's jaw dropped. Surely she had misheard. What did she say? Hermione breathed, leaning forward. Alicia's papers floated across the room and landed gracefully on top of those in favor of the petition. Hermione's mouth snapped shut. Her eyes widened, and her hand reached out to grab both Draco and Ginny's arms, her fingertips digging into their flesh with what she imagined was enough force to draw blood. "The council has heard the majority vote in favor of abolishing the Statue of Secrecy. We will be taking a brief intermission while the council deliberates." Prudence snapped angrily, banging the gavel and storming out the side door. Her colleagues, in varying degrees of intrigue, annoyance, and excitement, followed after her. Hermione whipped around to look at Draco and then Ginny. What the fuck just happened? Which one of you did something? Hermione hissed, a little accusatory. Ginny grimaced and unfurled Hermione's fingers from her arm and patted the top of her hand in a show of condescending comfort before shaking out her own arm, which did, in fact, have angry red half-moon circles indented into her flesh. She said, Ginny started with a sigh of relief, that majority is in favor. You hit your 60% and I didn't do anything, so don't look at me. Hermione spun around to Draco, who endured her iron grip without complaint. I didn't do anything, love. Scout's honor. Leaders from around the world shuffled out of the hearing room to stretch their legs for the first time since the session had begun. Hermione caught sight of Alicia among them and jumped up to follow her, catching up to her just as the witch turned down the corridor towards the restroom. Why did you vote in favor? We would have lost if you had said no. Alicia sighed deeply and turned, tilting her head toward the ceiling in an annoyance as she did so. You have been nothing but a pain in my side for months now. I will likely be voted out of Parliament next month, and if that happens, I know you will have someone planted on the inside to replace me. That doesn't explain why you voted yes, Hermione shook her head, not following the Italian witch's reasoning. I do not like you, nor do I approve of your methods. I can appreciate, however, that some of your arguments make sense, and I can see how some of your proposals warrant further exploration. You are not at all how Kingsley described you to be, and exactly as dangerous as he said at the same time. Alicia growled at her. Hermione's heart started pounding in her chest. Wait, what? I assume your prophet received our letter, okay? Alicia seemed to find a small victory in the shock on Hermione's face, and no doubt on Ginny and Draco's as well. I did not know of the prophecy when I met you. In the event of his death, Kingsley had safeguards in place. His journals transferred into my possession. I do not approve of you, Miss Granger, but I have to trust the process, and trust that the good I have seen come from the monster in there is only the beginning. I will find a way to remain in power, and I will be keeping an eye on you, on all of you. Now, if you'll excuse me. Alicia turned and strolled away, leaving Hermione reeling with the information she had been given. Hermione turned to Ginny and Draco in surprise. I don't even know what to say to that. Hermione threw her arms out to the side. Who knew killing kings would have been the final nail in the coffin for the Order, too? Ginny raised an eyebrow and tracked the retreating Italian. Come on, we should be there when the committee comes back, Draco said, his hand reaching out to sit at her lower back and guiding her back to the hearing room and to their seats. So what happens now? Ginny asks. I mean, what are they deliberating in there? Technically, they could choose to ignore the majority and vote with the minority, Draco started. But it wouldn't be a good look. Hermione could challenge it and put in a request to have it heard by a second committee for a breach of governing right. But then everyone would need to vote again. It would probably piss a lot of countries off as well because, by all rights, Hermione has the win here, Draco explained. Slowly, the world leaders began to file back into the room and take their seats, some choosing to take up conversation with their neighbors and others choosing to sit and sulk over their vote being the minority. All Hermione could do was sit and watch as the second hand ticked around the giant clock on the far wall, ticking in debate for the future of the wizarding world. 5,248 ticks. It was a lot of ticks to sit waiting in limbo to decide if her fight was over or if she could move on and live her life now. If she had given enough. The doors opened and her immediate reaction was relief because Prudence looked as pissed off as Alicia had. And if she was pissed off, it was probably a good indication that she had not gotten what she wanted. The council has reached a verdict in the case of petition 693 SQV, application to overturn the Statute of Secrecy bill. With a 60% majority vote being held globally, the council, Prudence glowered, supports the global consensus and rules that the bill will be overturned. Cheering rang out through the crowd of those who had voted in favor, but all Hermione could hear was the whooshing of blood in her ears. She had done it. She had fucking done it. With the additional condition that all elected officials will form a new Provisional Council of Unified Nations and will meet bi-monthly to ensure that the success of this ruling is continued. If it is found to be a threat to our society, then the council will submit an appeal to this board immediately. She banged the gavel again. The hearing may be dismissed. Hermione couldn't believe it. They had won. Draco guided her through a daze out of the courtroom, nodding their thanks and sharing enthusiasms with those who threw congratulation and celebratory remarks their way. He guided her to the portkey point, and Hermione finally snapped to as the pulling sensation at her navel whisked them away to their home in France, landing face to face with her housemates, who were all pacing the dining room anxiously. "About bloody time," Pansy shouted. "What the hell happened?" "We won," Hermione whispered so quietly she may as well not have spoken at all. "What was that, Princess?" Theo frowned. Hermione looked up at their anxious faces and smiled. "We won!" Cheers erupted from the group, and they all started bouncing around in excitement. "Well, that's it then. We're getting shit-faced," Astoria chanted, rushing into the sitting room to start mixing drinks. A moment later, music floated through, and everyone started migrating into the sitting room. Daphne and Pansy flopped down on the couch in the same position that they had been in the first night that she and Ginny had arrived in the house. "Well then, what now?" Theo asked expectantly, perched on the armrest of the sofa. "What do you mean?" Hermione asked. "I mean, what's next on the great agenda of Hermione Granger?" Hermione stood there for a moment and thought about it. A smile pulled at her lips that continued to grow. "Who knows?" Drinks started floating their way. Hermione caught hers and recognized it as an excitable. Draco eyed his own with skepticism, sniffing it and scrunching his nose before taking a cautionary sip. "Oh, no thanks," Ginny said, shaking her head as Astoria got ready to send one to the redhead. "I can't drink anymore." "What? Why not?" Daphne frowned in confusion. "Oh my God, are you actually?" Hermione screeched, spilling some of her drink over the side of her glass. Blaise flexed his hand and vanished the mess. "Wait, what? What's happening?" Theo asked. "I'm pregnant," Ginny smiled at the group. The shocked silence didn't last long before everyone started screaming their excitement again. "We're having a kid!" Hermione beamed and started jumping up and down. Hermione's eyes met Ginny across the chaos of everyone jumping around. They had done it. The war was over, and although they still had a way to go, victory was theirs. And that's it. Oh my gosh. If you made it this far, thank you for coming along with this ride. Apostasy is like my favorite. I'm so glad I got to share it with the rest of the world and anybody who comes along. You can find me on socials. Happy to talk about it with anybody. I love this fic so much, and I'm glad that it's like out there in the world now. Stay tuned. I have a few fics lined up to see what's coming down the pipeline. Yeah. Thank you.